I used to think being the dramatic one was my biggest flaw. That maybe if I questioned less, stayed quiet more, and stopped making mountains out of molehills, my dad would finally believe me when it mattered. But no matter how many times I was proven right, he always chose to believe my stepbrother Ethan over me. My name is Riley, and this is the story of how a stolen package and a delivery camera changed everything between us forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Willowbrook, I learned early that truth didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. My dad, Robert, married Ethan's mom when I was 12 and Ethan was 14. From day one, the message was crystal clear. Ethan was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was the troublemaker who saw problems where none existed. It started with small things. When my favorite bracelet went missing from my dresser, I told Dad I was sure Ethan had taken it. He'd been in my room earlier asking to borrow my phone charger, and the bracelet was right there on top. Dad's response? "Riley, honey, you probably just misplaced it. Ethan wouldn't take your jewelry. Maybe check your backpack again." 3 days later, I found it in Ethan's room while looking for my borrowed charger. When I confronted Dad with the evidence, he just shrugged. "He probably picked it up by accident when he grabbed the charger. You're being way too suspicious." That became the pattern. When $20 disappeared from my wallet, it was, "You probably spent it and forgot." When my favorite hoodie vanished from the laundry room and I saw Ethan wearing something identical to school, it was, "Coincidences happen, Riley. Not everything is a conspiracy." The worst part wasn't the stolen items. It was the constant gaslighting. Dad had this way of making me feel like I was paranoid, overdramatic, and vindictive for even suggesting Ethan might be less than perfect. He'd use this patient, patronizing tone like he was dealing with a child having an irrational tantrum. "Riley, I need you to stop making these accusations," he'd say, running his hand through his graying hair. "Ethan's a good kid. He's dealing with a lot with his parents' divorce, and the last thing he needs is his stepsister treating him like a criminal." I learned to swallow my words, to question my own judgment, to accept that in the hierarchy of our blended family, my voice would always come second to Ethan's reputation. Preparing and narrating this story, it took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. By the time I turned 16, the dynamic was set in stone. Ethan was the charming, charismatic athlete who brought friends over and made Dad laugh with his stories about football practice and weekend adventures. I was the bookish, introverted daughter who needed to learn to get along better and give people the benefit of the doubt. The favoritism showed in countless ways. When Ethan crashed Dad's car into a mailbox sophomore year, Dad calmly handled the insurance claim and told neighbors it was just one of those things. When I accidentally scratched the garage door with my bike, I lost my allowance for 2 months and had to do extra chores to learn responsibility. When Ethan failed his chemistry class, Dad hired a tutor and told him everyone struggles with something. When I got a B+ in calculus instead of my usual A, I got a lecture about not applying myself and not living up to my potential. The worst incident happened during my junior year. I'd been saving money from my part-time job at the local bookstore for months to buy a new laptop for college applications. I kept the cash in an envelope in my desk drawer. Stupid, I know. But I was 17 and didn't trust banks yet. $340, earned through countless hours of shelving books and helping customers. One morning, the envelope was gone. I tore my room apart, checking every possible hiding spot twice. Then I checked the common areas, thinking maybe I'd moved it and forgotten. Nothing. That's when I remembered Ethan asking to borrow my stapler the night before. He'd been in my room, alone, for at least 5 minutes. I found him in the kitchen, casually eating cereal like it was any other Tuesday. "Ethan, did you see an envelope in my room yesterday? It had money in it?" He looked up with those wide, innocent blue eyes that always seemed to work magic on Dad. "Money? Why would I take your money?" "I didn't say you took it. I asked if you saw it." "Well, I didn't see it either. Maybe you spent it and forgot?" That phrase, "maybe you forgot," had become the family's go-to response for anything I couldn't immediately prove. It made me want to scream. When Dad got home from work, I was waiting in the living room, ready to present my case calmly and rationally. I explained about the money, about Ethan being in my room, about the timing. I even suggested we could check if Ethan had made any unusual purchases recently. Dad's face went through several expressions: confusion, disappointment, and finally that familiar look of tired frustration he got whenever I brought up concerns about Ethan. Riley, $300 is a lot of money to just leave lying around. Are you absolutely sure you didn't deposit it somewhere and forget? Or maybe spend some of it gradually? The way he said accusation made it sound like I was filing a police report instead of asking my father to help figure out what happened to my money. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying he was the only person in my room, and now the money's gone. Dad called Ethan downstairs. Son, Riley seems to think you might know something about some missing money from her room. Ethan's performance was Oscar-worthy. His face crumpled into genuine-looking hurt and confusion. Dad, I would never steal from Riley. I can't believe she thinks I would do that. His voice even cracked a little. I didn't say you stole it, I interjected. You're basically calling me a thief, Ethan said, his eyes welling up with tears. I thought we were family. Dad's expression softened as he looked at Ethan, then hardened when he turned back to me. Riley, I think you owe your stepbrother an apology. The words hit me like a physical blow. An apology? Dad, my money's missing. Your money that you left unsecured in a desk drawer. Money that could have been lost in any number of ways. And instead of considering other possibilities, you immediately blamed Ethan. That's not fair, and it's not the kind of family dynamic I want in this house. I stared at him, feeling something inside me crack. So you're not even going to look into it? There's nothing to look into. Ethan says he didn't take it, and I believe him. End of discussion. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. The money was never found. Ethan never faced any consequences. And I learned another painful lesson about my place in the family hierarchy. A week later, I noticed Ethan wearing new sneakers, expensive ones. When I casually asked where he got them, he said he'd been saving his allowance. Dad beamed with pride and complimented him on his financial responsibility. Those shoes cost exactly $340. I looked them up online. But by then, I knew better than to say anything. The pattern was clear. Ethan's word would always trump mine, no matter what evidence I had or how logical my case was. I was the girl who cried wolf, except the wolf was real. He just happened to be the golden child. I started keeping detailed records after that. Dates, times, witnesses when possible. I documented every suspicious incident, every dismissal, every time my concerns were waved away. I told myself it was just for my own sanity, to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. The incidents continued throughout high school. Small thefts, borrowed items that never got returned, lies that I couldn't prove but knew were lies. Each time I brought something up, Dad's response became more exasperated, more dismissive. Riley, this has to stop. You can't keep accusing Ethan every time something goes wrong. You're being paranoid. I'm disappointed in this attitude. Families trust each other. I learned to live with it, to accept that I would never be believed, never be taken seriously when it came to Ethan. I focused on my studies, got into a good college 3 hours away, and counted down the days until I could escape the suffocating dynamic of our house. But even in college, even with distance, the pattern followed me home during breaks and holidays. Ethan would visit my room, items would go missing, and Dad would give me the same tired speech about giving people the benefit of the doubt. When I graduated and moved back to Willowbrook temporarily to save money for my own apartment, I thought I'd learned to navigate the minefield of our family dynamic. I kept my valuables locked up, I avoided leaving anything tempting in Ethan's path, and I bit my tongue when smaller items disappeared. I thought I was being smart, strategic, mature. I had no idea that the biggest test was still coming. I had no idea that this time I'd have something Ethan couldn't explain away with innocent blue eyes and wounded protestations. I had no idea that modern technology was about to become my greatest ally in a battle I'd been fighting alone for nearly a decade. The package that would change everything was still sitting in a warehouse waiting to be shipped, and I was still the daughter who cried wolf, still learning to swallow my truth to keep the family peace. But that was all about to end. The package was supposed to arrive on a Tuesday. I'd been tracking it obsessively for 3 days. A new professional camera lens I'd saved up for months to buy. Photography had become my escape, my way of capturing truth in a world where my words seemed to mean nothing. This lens would help me start freelancing seriously, maybe even build a career that could get me completely independent from the chaos of our family dynamic. I was working from home that day, doing graphic design for a small marketing firm downtown. The tracking showed out for delivery at 8:47 a.m., and I had positioned myself at the kitchen table where I had a clear view of the front porch. Ethan was supposed to be at his construction job. He dropped out of community college the year before and was working for a local contractor who specialized in home renovations. At 11:23 a.m., I saw the brown delivery truck pull up. Perfect timing. I watched the driver, a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, walk up our front steps with a medium-sized box. She scanned it, placed it carefully by the door, rang the doorbell, and headed back to her truck. I gave it 30 seconds, then went to retrieve my package. The porch was empty. I stood there for a moment, confused. I'd watched the driver place the box right there, maybe 2 feet from where I was standing. There was nowhere for it to have blown in the slight breeze, no way it could have fallen or rolled away. I checked around the sides of the porch, thinking maybe the driver had placed it somewhere less visible. Nothing. I looked in the bushes, behind the decorative planters Mom had arranged last spring. Still nothing. That's when I heard Ethan's truck pulling into the driveway. My stomach dropped. Ethan wasn't supposed to be home. His shift didn't end until 4 p.m., and he never took lunch breaks at home. The job site was 15 miles away. I watched him get out of his truck, and there was something different about his posture. He looked around nervously before heading toward the house, like he was checking to see if anyone was watching. "Hey," I called out as he reached the front steps. "Did you see a package when you got here?" He looked up, and for just a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Panic? But it was gone so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Package? No. Why?" "I had a delivery about 10 minutes ago. I saw the driver put it right here, but now it's gone." Ethan shrugged, that casual gesture I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Maybe they delivered it to the wrong house. You know how these drivers are. They're always in a hurry." "I watched her put it on our porch. She rang our doorbell." "Well, it's not here now." He stepped past me toward the front door. "Maybe someone stole it. Porch pirates are everywhere these days." Something in his tone set off every alarm bell in my head. It was too casual, too practiced, like he'd already prepared this explanation. I followed him inside. "Ethan, this is important. The package had expensive equipment in it. If someone stole it, then you should call the delivery company and report it." He was already heading toward the stairs, clearly trying to end the conversation. "Where were you just now? I thought you were working until 4. He paused, his hand on the banister. "Job site got rained out. Boss sent us home early." I looked out the front window. It was a perfectly clear day, not a cloud in the bright September sky. "Rained out? It's sunny." "Different job site," he said quickly. "Anyway, I'm gonna grab a shower before I head back out." He disappeared upstairs before I could ask any more questions. I spent the next hour calling the delivery company, filing a theft report, and checking with neighbors to see if the package had been misdelivered. Mrs. Chen next door had been gardening all morning and insisted she would have noticed anyone approaching our porch after the delivery truck left. "The only person I saw was your brother," she said, wiping soil from her hands. "He came home maybe 10 or 5 minutes after the truck left." 5 or 10 minutes. Exactly the window when my package disappeared. When Dad got home from work, I was waiting in the living room with the timeline written out and my phone ready to show him the tracking information. Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious. He looked tired, the way he always did after long days at the insurance office. What's going on, Riles? I explained everything methodically, the package, the delivery, watching it get placed on the porch, finding it gone, Ethan arriving shortly after. I showed him the tracking info, told him about Mrs. Chen's statement, pointed out the discrepancy in Ethan's story about rain. Dad listened, but I could see his expression shifting with each detail I provided. Not toward understanding or concern, but toward that familiar look of weary frustration. Riley, what exactly are you suggesting here? I'm suggesting that Ethan took my package. Based on what? The fact that he came home from work early? Based on the timing, the lying about why he was home, and the fact that he was the only person who had opportunity. So you're accusing your stepson of stealing from you? Again? The word again hit like a slap. It carried the weight of every previous conversation, every dismissed concern, every time I'd been made to feel like the problem. Dad, this isn't like the other times. I have a timeline. I have a witness. Mrs. Chen saw Ethan come home from work. That's not the same as seeing him steal a package. But the timing proves nothing, Riley. Packages get stolen all the time. It's a real problem in this neighborhood. I felt something crack inside my chest. So, you think it's more likely that a random stranger somehow snuck onto our porch in the 5-minute window between the delivery and Ethan arriving home, stole my package without Mrs. Chen noticing, and disappeared without a trace? I think it's more likely than my stepson stealing from his sister, yes. Your stepson who has a history of taking my things? Dad's face darkened. We've been through this, Riley. You've never proven any of those allegations. Because you've never wanted them to be proven. The words came out louder than I intended, sharp with years of accumulated frustration. Dad stepped back slightly, his expression shifting from tired to angry. That's enough. I won't have you slandering Ethan in this house. Slandering? Dad, I'm trying to tell you what happened. You're trying to blame someone else for something that has a dozen perfectly reasonable explanations. Name one. Porch pirates, wrong address delivery, package fell off the porch and someone walking by picked it up. The delivery driver made an error and it never actually got delivered here. He counted them off on his fingers like he was scoring points in a debate. I watched her put it on our porch. People make mistakes, Riley. You might have seen what you expected to see. And there it was, the familiar refrain. I was mistaken, I was confused, I was seeing things that didn't happen. Dad, please, just ask him. Ask Ethan if he took it. I'm not interrogating my stepson based on your suspicions. They're not suspicions, they're facts. He lied about why he was home. Maybe he was embarrassed about getting sent home early. Maybe he simplified the explanation because he didn't think it mattered. Dad had an excuse for everything, a rational explanation that painted Ethan as innocent and me as paranoid. It was a masterclass in gaslighting, and I'd watched him perform it dozens of times over the years. That's when Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, fresh from his shower, looking like the picture of wronged innocence. "What's all the yelling about?" he asked, jogging down the steps with that easy confidence that had always charmed Dad. "Riley thinks you stole her package," Dad said, and the way he said it made it sound ridiculous, like I'd accused Ethan of stealing the moon. Ethan's face fell into an expression of hurt confusion that I'd seen 100 times before. "Are you serious? Riley, why would I steal from you? The package disappeared right before you got home. And that means I took it?" He looked genuinely wounded. "Dad, I can't keep living like this. Every time something goes wrong, she blames me. It's exhausting." I watched Dad's face soften as he looked at Ethan, the golden child being persecuted by his unreasonable stepsister. "I know, son. Riley, this has to stop." "Dad, no. I'm done with this pattern, Riley. You cannot keep accusing Ethan every time you lose something or something doesn't go your way.
I didn't lose anything. It was stolen. And you immediately assumed Ethan did it without any proof, just like always? The injustice of it crashed over me like a wave. Years of stolen items, dismissed concerns, and gaslighting crystallized into the single moment. I was 24 years old, college educated, working a professional job, and my father was treating me like a delusional child having a tantrum. Fine, I said quietly. Don't believe me. Riley! No, Dad. You've made your choice. You've always made your choice. I turned and walked toward the stairs, but Dad's voice stopped me. Where are you going? To my room. To figure out what to do next. About what? I looked back at him, this man who was supposed to protect me, supposed to believe me, supposed to care when I was hurt. He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why I was upset about his complete dismissal of my concerns. About everything. I went upstairs and closed my bedroom door, my hands shaking with rage and hurt and something else, a cold, clear determination that felt different from anything I had experienced before. I wasn't going to fight this battle with words anymore. I wasn't going to present logical arguments or timelines or witness statements. I wasn't going to beg to be believed. I was going to get proof. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Mrs. Chen's security camera that faced her driveway but might have caught the edge of our porch, thinking about the delivery company's tracking system and whether they kept more detailed records, thinking about Ethan's truck and his job site and all the small inconsistencies in his story. But mostly, I thought about Dad's face when he dismissed my concerns, the casual way he'd chosen Ethan's comfort over my truth, the automatic assumption that I was wrong, dramatic, and vindictive. Something fundamental had shifted inside me during that conversation. The desperate need for his validation, the hope that someday he'd believe me, the willingness to keep trying to prove my worth, all of it just stopped. I didn't need him to believe me anymore. I just needed to prove I was right. And this time, I was going to make sure the proof was undeniable. The first thing I did was stop talking, not just about the package, but about everything. I stopped bringing up concerns, stopped asking questions when things seemed off, stopped trying to make Dad see what was right in front of him. At family dinners, I ate quietly while Ethan entertained everyone with stories about work and weekend plans. When Dad asked about my day, I gave brief, polite answers and steered the conversation elsewhere. They probably thought I'd finally learned my lesson, finally accepted the family dynamic and decided to stop being difficult. What they didn't realize was that my silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The morning after our confrontation about the package, I called the delivery company again. This time, instead of just reporting the theft, I asked detailed questions about their procedures, their tracking systems, and their vehicles. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration," said the customer service representative, a patient woman named Joyce, who seemed genuinely concerned about my situation. "Let me transfer you to our security department. They might have additional information that could help." The security department was a revelation. Not only did they track every package with GPS coordinates and timestamps, but many of their newer delivery vehicles were equipped with dashboard cameras that recorded continuously during routes. "The camera footage gets automatically uploaded to our cloud servers at the end of each shift," explained Derek, the security specialist I spoke to. "We keep it for 90 days in case of disputes or theft claims." My heart started racing. "So you might have footage of my delivery?" "It's possible. What was your tracking number again?" I gave him the information, and he put me on hold for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes. "Good news," he said when he came back. "That route was covered by one of our newer trucks with the camera system. I can see the delivery was recorded. However, I can't release the footage directly to you, company policy, but if you file a formal theft report with local police, they can request it through official channels." I thanked him and immediately called the Willowbrook Police Department. The officer who took my report, Sergeant Martinez, was thorough and professional. She asked detailed questions about the timeline, took down Mrs. Chen's contact information as a witness, and explained that delivery camera footage had become increasingly important evidence in package theft cases.
"These cameras are pretty sophisticated now," she said as she filed the paperwork. "They capture everything, the delivery itself, but also what happens afterward. If someone took your package, we'll see it."
How long does it usually take to get the footage? For something like this, usually within a week. The delivery companies are pretty cooperative with theft investigations. A week? I had to wait a week to potentially see proof of what I already knew had happened. But I didn't spend that week sitting around hoping. I spent it learning. I researched everything I could about package theft, delivery procedures, and surveillance evidence. I learned about metadata, timestamps, and how digital evidence gets authenticated in legal proceedings. I discovered online forums where delivery drivers discussed the new camera systems and how they'd helped solve numerous theft cases. More importantly, I started paying attention to patterns I'd previously ignored. I began keeping a detailed log of Ethan's comings and goings. When he said he was working, when he claimed job sites got canceled, when he had unexplained new purchases. I started photographing license plates of cars that visited when he was home, noting times and dates. I researched his employer and learned that the construction company kept detailed timesheets and job site logs, information that would be easy to verify if needed. I also started going through my old notes about previous incidents, the missing money, the stolen items, the times I'd been dismissed and gaslit. I organized everything chronologically and looked for patterns. What I found was disturbing. Ethan's thefts weren't random or opportunistic. They were calculated. Items disappeared when I was out of town, when Dad was working late, when there were fewer witnesses around. The more expensive items were taken during times when Ethan had plausible reasons to need money, before big purchases, before trips, before social events where he'd want to impress people. The missing $340 had disappeared the week before homecoming when Ethan had suddenly started talking about taking his girlfriend to an expensive restaurant beforehand. The missing jewelry had vanished right before Christmas when Ethan was buying gifts for his girlfriend and complaining about being broke. There was a method to it, a system. This wasn't a stepbrother who occasionally succumbed to temptation. This was someone who had turned stealing from me into a regular supplement to his income. I spent hours researching surveillance systems and home security cameras. I learned about motion detection, cloud storage, and how to position cameras for optimal coverage. I even drove to electronics stores and asked detailed questions about different systems, claiming I was helping a friend who had had break-ins. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was having coffee with my old roommate, Jessica, who'd become a paralegal for a law firm that handled theft and fraud cases. When I mentioned my situation, carefully, without naming specifics, she immediately perked up. "Oh, you need to check if your delivery driver had one of those new body cameras. Some companies are piloting them in addition to the truck cameras. They wear them like police officers do, and they capture everything from the driver's perspective." Body cameras? Yeah, it's partly for driver safety, partly for package security. The footage is incredibly detailed because it shows exactly what the driver sees when they make the delivery, plus what happens immediately after they leave. That night, I called Derek at the delivery company's security department again. "I was wondering," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "do your drivers wear body cameras in addition to the truck cameras?" "Some do. We're testing the system in certain areas. Let me check your delivery route." "Yes, actually, that driver was part of the pilot program." "Why do you ask?" "The police mentioned that additional footage might be helpful for the investigation." "Absolutely. The body camera footage is actually better quality than the truck cameras in many cases. When the police submit their official request, we'll include everything we have." I hung up feeling like I'd just discovered buried treasure. Not only was there footage of my package being delivered, but there were potentially 2 different camera angles showing what happened afterward. 3 days later, Sergeant Martinez called. "Ms. Thompson, I have some interesting news about your package theft case. The delivery company sent over the footage and, well, I think you're going to want to see this. Can you come to the station this afternoon?" My hands were shaking as I drove to the police station. Part of me was terrified that the cameras would show nothing useful, that somehow Ethan had managed to avoid being recorded, that I'd still be left without proof. But a bigger part of me already knew what I was going to see. Sergeant Martinez led me to a small conference room with a computer monitor set up on the table. Before we watch this, I want you to know that what you reported checks out completely. The footage is very clear, and we have multiple angles of the incident. She clicked play on the first video, the truck's dashboard camera. I watched the truck pull up to our house, saw the familiar driver get out with my package. The timestamp showed 11:23 a.m., exactly what I remembered. Now watch this, Sergeant Martinez said, switching to a second video. This is from the driver's body camera. The footage was incredibly clear. I could see our front porch from the driver's perspective as she approached with the package. She placed it carefully next to the door, exactly where I'd seen her put it. She pressed the doorbell, and I could actually hear the chime through the camera's audio. Then she walked back to her truck, got in, and drove away. The timestamp showed 11:26 a.m. when the truck disappeared from view. Now, here's where it gets interesting, Sergeant Martinez said. The truck camera kept recording as the driver continued her route. Watch the timestamp. At 11:31 a.m., exactly 5 minutes after the delivery truck left, Ethan's white pickup truck pulled into our driveway. I watched him get out, look around carefully to see if anyone was watching, then walk quickly to the front porch. The angle from the truck camera, parked across the street for the next delivery, captured everything perfectly. Ethan picked up my package, looked at the label, and then did something that made my blood run cold. He smiled. Not a confused smile like someone who'd found a misdelivered package, a satisfied, knowing smile. He carried the package to his truck, placed it in the passenger seat, and drove away. The timestamp showed 11:34 a.m. There's more, Sergeant Martinez said, switching back to the body camera footage. The driver's camera was still recording when she made her next delivery across the street. Watch what happens. The body camera footage showed the driver walking to Mrs. Chen's neighbor's house with a different package. In the background, perfectly framed in the shot, was our front porch. Empty, exactly as I'd found it. Then, at 11:31 a.m., according to the timestamp, Ethan's truck appeared in the frame. The body camera captured him getting out, approaching the porch, and taking my package in full, undeniable detail. I sat in stunned silence, watching my stepbrother's theft play out on screen. After years of being gaslit, dismissed, and made to feel crazy in my own house, I was looking at absolute, irrefutable proof that I'd been right all along. We have him from multiple angles, Sergeant Martinez said, switching back to the body camera footage. License plate, clear facial identification, the actual theft in progress. This is about as solid as evidence gets. What happens now? Well, that depends on what you want to do. We can arrest him for theft. The value of the lens makes it a felony in this state. Or, if you prefer, we can use this as leverage to recover your property and get restitution without pressing charges. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. Ethan walking away with my package, that satisfied smile still visible on his face. Can I have copies of this footage? Absolutely. It's evidence in your case, so you're entitled to copies. That evening, I sat in my room with my laptop, watching the footage over and over again. Not because I enjoyed seeing Ethan's crime, though there was a certain vindication in finally having proof, but because I was planning my next move. I had spent years being dismissed, gaslit, and made to feel like the problem in my own family. I had swallowed my truth to keep the peace, questioned my own perceptions to maintain family harmony, and accepted a role as the difficult daughter who saw problems where none existed. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had evidence now. Not suspicions, not circumstantial evidence, not reasonable conclusions based on limited information. I had crystal clear, high definition, legally admissible proof of exactly what I'd been saying all along. More than that, I had learned something important about myself during these weeks of investigation. I was capable, intelligent, and resourceful. I could gather evidence, build a case, and solve problems methodically. The skills I developed weren't just about this one incident. They were about taking control of my own narrative. I spent the next few days researching Ethan's job records, cross-referencing his claimed work schedule with the actual timesheets his employer kept. What I found didn't surprise me, but it completed the picture. There had been no rain that day, no job site cancellations. Ethan had simply left work early, lied about why, and timed his theft perfectly for when he thought no one was watching. But someone was watching. Multiple cameras, actually, recording everything in perfect detail. I made copies of all the evidence and organized it into a comprehensive file. Police reports, delivery records, camera footage, witness statements, employment verification, everything needed to tell the complete story of what had happened. For the first time in years, I felt truly powerful. Not because I was planning some elaborate revenge, but because I finally had something that couldn't be dismissed, explained away, or rationalized. I had the truth, backed by technology that didn't lie, recorded by cameras that had no bias or agenda. And I was going to use it. I just had to decide when and how to make my move. Part of me wanted to march downstairs immediately and present everything to Dad, to force him to confront the reality he'd been denying for years. But another part of me, the part that had learned patience and strategy over these past few weeks, knew that timing mattered, presentation mattered. Having the right moment to deliver undeniable truth mattered. I thought about all the family dinners where I'd been dismissed, all the times I'd been made to apologize for telling the truth, all the years of being treated like the problem child in my own home. This time was going to be different. This time, I was holding all the cards. I spent my evenings researching local locksmiths, learning about home security systems, and documenting every detail of our family's daily routines. Not because I was planning anything malicious, but because I was finally thinking strategically instead of emotionally. Knowledge was power, preparation was strength, and patience was about to pay off in ways that would change the dynamic of our family forever. The only question left was when to play my hand. The opportunity came 3 weeks later during what had become a monthly tradition in our house, Sunday family dinner. Dad had started insisting on these gatherings after I moved back home, claiming he wanted to strengthen family bonds and make sure we stayed connected. Really, they were just another stage for Ethan to perform his golden child routine, while I sat quietly in the background. This particular Sunday felt different from the moment I walked into the dining room. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that something significant was about to happen. I'd been carrying the USB drive with the footage in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Today felt like that moment.
Ethan was already holding court, regaling Dad with stories about a big renovation project his crew had just completed. He was animated and charming, using his hands to describe the layout of the house they'd worked on, making Dad laugh with impressions of difficult clients. "You should see this place," Ethan was saying as I took my seat. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, completely custom everything. The owner spent more on cabinet hardware than most people spend on entire kitchens. Dad nodded appreciatively. "That's the kind of clientele you want to build relationships with. Those high-end customers, they refer their friends, and before you know it, you're the go-to contractor for the whole neighborhood." Exactly. My boss is already talking about putting me in charge of the next big project. Says I have a natural talent for dealing with wealthy clients. I listened to this exchange while cutting my pot roast, noting the familiar pattern.
Ethan painting himself as indispensable, Dad offering sage business advice, both of them basking in the glow of imagined future success. "That's wonderful, son," Dad said, and I felt the familiar pang at hearing him use that word. Son. Never stepson, always just son. Like biology didn't matter when it came to claiming Ethan as his own. "What about you, Riley?" Dad asked, turning his attention to me with what felt like an afterthought. "How's the freelance work going?" "Fine. Steady clients, good projects." "That's good." He waited for me to elaborate, but I just continued eating. After a moment, he turned back to Ethan. "You know, Ethan, I was thinking we should look into getting you some business cards made, if you're going to be dealing with high-end clients." And just like that, I was forgotten again. The conversation flowed around me as if I weren't there. Dad and Ethan discussing business strategies and networking opportunities, while I became part of the furniture. About halfway through dinner, Dad's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "I need to take this," he said, stepping into the kitchen. "It's Mrs. Patterson from down the street." Ethan and I sat in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke. "You've been quiet lately," he said, not looking at me directly. "Have I?" "Yeah, usually you're, I don't know, more involved in conversations." I almost laughed at that. More involved, like my previous attempts to be heard had been welcomed instead of dismissed. "Just listening," I said. "Good. That's good." He seemed genuinely relieved. It's nice when things are peaceful, you know, when we're not having drama about stuff. Stuff. He couldn't even say it directly. The accusations, the confrontations, the times I'd tried to hold him accountable for his actions. Dad returned from the kitchen with a strange expression on his face. "That was interesting," he said, settling back into his chair. "Mrs. Patterson wanted to let me know that the police were asking questions about package thefts in the neighborhood. Apparently there's been a whole string of them over the past few months." My heart started beating faster, but I kept my expression neutral. "Package thefts?" Ethan asked, and I caught the slight tightness in his voice. "Yeah, seems like someone's been targeting delivery trucks. The police are reviewing security camera footage from various houses and businesses to try and identify the thief." Ethan shifted in his seat. That's crazy. People these days have no respect for other people's property." "I know," Dad said, shaking his head. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned that they're particularly interested in cases from 3 weeks ago. Apparently, that's when most of the thefts occurred." 3 weeks ago. The exact time frame of my stolen package. "Did they catch anyone?" I asked, my voice carefully casual. "Not yet, but Mrs. Patterson said the detective she spoke with seemed very confident. Apparently they have multiple camera angles of at least one incident, and they're expecting to make an arrest soon." The color drained from Ethan's face so quickly I thought he might be sick. He set down his fork and reached for his water glass with a hand that was visibly shaking. "You okay, son?" Dad asked, noticing Ethan's sudden pallor. "Yeah, just thinking about how scary it is. Package thieves, I mean. You never know who you can trust anymore." The irony of that statement hung in the air like smoke. "Well," continued Dad, cutting another bite of roast, "I'm sure they'll catch whoever's responsible. People like that always get too confident, too sloppy. They think they're smart enough to get away with it. But technology usually catches up to them." Ethan excused himself to use the bathroom, and I heard his footsteps rushing up the stairs. Dad didn't seem to notice anything unusual, but I could practically feel the panic radiating from my stepbrother. When Ethan returned, he looked like he'd splashed cold water on his face. His color was better, but there was a nervous energy about him that hadn't been there before. "So, anyway," Dad said, picking up his previous conversation thread, "I think business cards are definitely the way to go. Maybe we could even look into a simple website." "Dad," I interrupted quietly. Both men looked at me in surprise.
I rarely spoke during these dinners unless directly asked a question. "I need to tell you something." Dad's expressions shifted to that familiar look he got whenever I wanted to discuss something serious. "Riley, if this is about... It's about my package. The one that was stolen 3 weeks ago." The silence that fell over the table was immediate and heavy. Ethan's fork clinked against his plate as his hand trembled. "Riley," Dad said, in that patient, patronizing tone I knew so well, "we discussed this. The package was stolen by porch pirates. It happens all the time." "No, Dad, it wasn't." "Honey, I know you want someone to blame." "I don't want someone to blame. I know who to blame." Dad set down his utensils and fixed me with a stern look. "Riley Thompson, we are not doing this again. I will not have you making accusations."
"I'm not making accusations," I said, reaching into my pocket. "I'm presenting evidence." I pulled out the USB drive and set it on the table between us. It was small, innocuous, but it might as well have been a bomb for the way it changed the atmosphere in the room. "What's that?" Dad asked. "Security camera footage from the delivery truck and the driver's body camera, showing exactly what happened to my package." Ethan's chair scraped against the floor as he suddenly stood up. I should probably get going," he said, his voice tight. "Early day tomorrow." "Sit down, Ethan," I said quietly. Something in my tone made him freeze. For the first time in our entire relationship, I was the one giving orders instead of being dismissed. Dad looked from the USB drive, to me, to Ethan, confusion and something else, fear, flickering across his face. "Riley, what exactly are you claiming this footage shows?" "I'm not claiming anything. I'm about to show you exactly what happened." I stood up and walked to Dad's laptop, which was sitting on the kitchen counter where he'd left it after checking his email earlier. I plugged in the USB drive and opened the video files. "Dad, I need you to come here and look at this." "Dad, this is ridiculous." "Dad," my voice was steel, "come here." Maybe it was the tone, maybe it was the confidence in my posture, but Dad actually got up and walked over to the laptop. Ethan remained frozen by his chair, looking like he was calculating the distance to the front door. I opened the first video file, the truck's dashboard camera footage. Dad watched in silence as the delivery truck pulled up to our house, as the driver got out with my package, as she placed it carefully by the front door. "Okay," Dad said slowly, "so the package was delivered. We already knew that. Keep watching." The timestamp showed 11:26 a.m. as the delivery truck drove away. At 11:31 a.m., exactly as I'd seen it weeks ago, Ethan's white pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Dad leaned closer to the screen. "That's Ethan's truck." "Yes." We watched Ethan get out, look around to make sure no one was watching, walk to the porch, and pick up my package. The camera angle was perfect. There was no mistaking what was happening. "What?" Dad's voice trailed off as he watched his golden child commit theft in high definition. "There's more," I said, opening the second video file. "This is from the delivery driver's body camera." The body camera footage was even more damning. It showed Ethan's face clearly as he took the package, showed him reading the label with my name on it, showed that satisfied smile I'd found so chilling. Dad stood in complete silence, watching his stepson steal from his daughter with undeniable clarity. When the video ended, the kitchen was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. "There are timestamps," I said calmly, "police reports, employment records showing Ethan wasn't at work when he claimed to be. Mrs. Chen's witness statement. This isn't speculation, Dad. This is documentation." Dad turned slowly to look at Ethan, who was still standing by his chair like a deer caught in the headlights. "Ethan," Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what is this?" "Dad, I can explain." "Explain!" The word came out like a gunshot. "Explain how you stole from your sister?"
It's not, I mean, I was going to give it back. You were going to give it back? Dad's voice was rising now. Ethan, you stole a package? You lied about being at work? You let me dismiss Riley's concerns when you knew she was telling the truth? I watched this exchange with a sense of surreal satisfaction. For the first time in my adult life, Dad was defending me instead of making excuses for Ethan. Dad, please, let me explain what really happened. I just watched what really happened, in high definition from multiple angles. Ethan's face crumpled, but instead of the manipulative tears I'd seen so many times before, these looked like genuine panic. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I needed the money, and I thought it was just some book or something small, and I could sell it and pay Riley back before anyone noticed. You thought? Dad's voice was dangerous now. You thought you could steal from your sister and no one would notice? Dad, how many times, Ethan? How many times have you done this? Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. How many times have I dismissed Riley's concerns because I believed you instead of her? The question hung in the air like an accusation, not just of Ethan, but of Dad himself. I watched my father's face as the implications hit him. Every dismissed complaint, every time he chose to believe Ethan's word over mine, every time he'd made me feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of me. Oh God, Dad whispered, sinking into a kitchen chair. Riley, how long has this been going on? I could have been kind. I could have minimized it, downplayed the pattern, made it easier for him to live with what he'd allowed to happen. Instead, I told him the truth. Years, Dad. It's been going on for years. The silence that followed was deafening. The money from my desk drawer junior year, my jewelry, my clothes, all the times I tried to tell you something was wrong and you told me I was being paranoid. Dad's face was gray now, aged a decade in the span of minutes. I have documentation going back to high school. Dates, amounts, patterns, every time you chose to believe him instead of me. Ethan was crying now, real tears streaming down his face. Riley, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant it for it to go this far.
I walked back to the laptop and ejected the USB drive, slipping it back into my pocket. The police have all of this evidence, I said matter-of-factly. They're waiting for my decision on whether to press charges. Riley, Dad said, his voice hoarse. Please, he's just a kid who made mistakes. He's 26 years old, Dad, and this wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated theft from someone he knew trusted him. I looked at both of them. Dad slumped in his chair, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him, and Ethan standing there with tears and snot running down his face. For years, you made me feel like I was crazy, I said to Dad. You gaslit me, dismissed me, and chose his comfort over my truth. Every single time. Riley, I'm not finished. My voice was calm but firm. You taught me that my voice didn't matter in this family, that my experiences weren't valid, that I couldn't trust my own perceptions. Dad flinched like I'd slapped him. But I learned something these past few weeks. I learned that I'm intelligent, capable, and resourceful. I learned that I can solve problems, gather evidence, and build an airtight case. I learned that I don't need your validation to know that I'm right. I picked up my purse from the counter and headed toward the door. Where are you going? Dad asked. I'm moving out. I found an apartment across town. I'll be out by Thursday. Riley, please, we can work through this. I stopped at the threshold and turned back to look at them. No, Dad, we can't. Because this isn't about the package or the money or any of the individual things Ethan stole. This is about the fact that for years, you chose to protect a liar at the expense of someone telling the truth. I looked directly at Ethan. You stole from me for years, but the worst thing you stole was my father's trust in me. And then I looked at Dad. And you let him. I walked out the front door and got into my car, my hands surprisingly steady as I started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I could see Dad standing in the doorway, looking lost and broken. But I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt free. The next morning, I called Sergeant Martinez and told her I wanted to press full charges against Ethan. By afternoon, he'd been arrested for felony theft. The local newspaper ran a small item about it 3 days later, mentioning his name and the charges. Dad called 17 times that first week. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from angry to pleading to broken. I deleted them without listening to most of them. Ethan's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal that would involve paying restitution and avoiding jail time. I declined. The case went to trial 6 months later, and the video evidence was so compelling that the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. I moved into my new apartment and discovered something wonderful: peace. For the first time in my adult life, I lived in a space where my belongings stayed where I put them, where my word was trusted, where I didn't have to question my own perceptions. The photography business I'd started with that stolen lens grew steadily. Ironic, really. Ethan's theft had delayed my equipment purchase by only a few weeks, but it had given me something much more valuable: the unshakable knowledge that I could trust myself. A year later, Dad sent me a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter that arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning. "Riley," it said, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I know that I failed you as a father in the most fundamental way possible. I chose to protect someone who was lying to me, and in doing so, I made you question your own reality. I've been in therapy since you left. Dr. Rodriguez says that what I did to you has a name: gaslighting, and that the damage can last for years. She's helping me understand how my need to see Ethan as perfect blinded me to the truth you were trying to tell me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. But I need you to know that you were right about everything. You were always right, and I was wrong to make you doubt that. I'm proud of who you've become, Riley, not because you proved me wrong, but because you had the strength to trust yourself when the person who should have believed you didn't. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand that too. Love, Dad." I read the letter 3 times, then put it in a box with other important documents. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't respond either. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars. Some relationships can be repaired, but they're never quite the same. I kept the letter, though, because it was proof, not just of his acknowledgement, but of something I'd fought to believe for years: that I could trust my own voice, my own perceptions, my own truth. The girl who used to question herself every time something went missing was gone. In her place was a woman who documented, investigated, and demanded proof. A woman who didn't need external validation to know she was right. A woman who would never again let anyone make her doubt her own reality. And that, more than any apology or conviction or vindication, was the real victory. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.